The pedal goes soft under your boot. Not gone. Soft, like stepping on a sponge. 80,000 pounds, nose pointed down a mountain, and the only thing between you and the bottom, just quit pushing back. So your hand drifts to the one gear that was never a gear. Truckers gave that move a name, and it's a joke told at a funeral. Georgia Overdrive. No transmission ever built has a gear by that name. The overdrive is pure sarcasm. To understand why a joke gets people killed on a regular basis, and why highway departments started carving beds of loose river rock into mountainsides just to catch the wreckage, you first have to answer a stranger question. Why did anyone ever think it was a good idea? Slip a loaded truck into neutral on a downgrade and something strange happens. The engine lets go of the wheels. No ratio between them, no compression fighting the rotation, nothing mechanical holding the rig back, and it keeps gaining speed while the fuel gauge barely moves. It behaves as though it found a gear above top gear, a free overdrive where the mountain does the work and the tank barely pays. Drivers called neutral the fastest gear in the truck, and they meant it, precisely because neutral isn't a gear at all. It's the absence of one. It feels like beating the system. And that feeling is the whole problem, because nothing about a mountain is ever free. The Georgia half isn't poetry either. Take Interstate 75 down out of the Appalachian foothills in the north of the state, and the grades stretch long and turn mean, the kind of descent that punished a loaded rig back when engine brakes were still working their way onto trucks through the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s. For an owner-operator counting pennies by the mile, every gallon he didn't burn coasting that hill for free was pure profit at the bottom. So they killed the connection at the top and handed the job to gravity. Georgia Overdrive. Free speed, courtesy of the grade. Here is where the joke stops being funny. The thing that kills a driver on a long grade was never weak brakes. That's the misunderstanding under the whole maneuver. A heavy truck's service brakes, the air-actuated drums on every axle, were never engineered to hold a fully loaded rig down a long mountain alone. They were built to supplement engine braking, not to carry the load. The engine does the real work. Dropped into a low gear, revs held high, the whole driveline turned into a brake with the Jake brake, that hammering bark off the stacks, bleeding the speed off the top. The wheel brakes only fine-tune. So when a driver knocks the truck into neutral, he isn't giving up a slice of control. He's throwing away his single most important tool and betting his life on the backup. And that backup has a trap built into its bones. Most people picture brake failure as wearing out, friction material ground to nothing. That is not what kills you on a grade. What kills you is geometry. Ride those drums hard on a long descent and they climb to hundreds of degrees, and hot steel does what all hot steel does. It grows. The drum expands outward, swelling away from the shoes pressing against its inner face. Now the shoes have to reach farther to make contact, and when they touch, they press with less force than a mile ago. So the driver pushes harder, more heat, more expansion, less braking, a loop that feeds on itself until the brakes cannot slow the truck at all. And here's the part everyone gets backwards. The brakes don't wear away beneath you. They retreat from you, backing off the shoes at the exact instant you're standing on the pedal with both boots. Here is the part almost nobody outside an engineering office hears. Take that same physics and put it to work in a disc brake instead of a drum, and the geometry that doomed the drum stops working against you. A disc isn't sealed inside a casting trapping its heat. It hangs in open air, so it sheds heat far faster. And the swelling cuts the other way. A heated drum grows in diameter and pulls away from the shoes. A heated rotor grows in thickness toward the pads, closing the gap instead of opening one. One traps its heat and retreats from you. The other dumps the heat and holds its ground. That's most of why the industry crawled away from drums. But drums were cheaper and trusted, so the changeover crept one model year at a time, which is why for years most rigs still ran the design that surrenders right when you lean on it hardest. In 1975, a singer named Bill Fries, better known to a whole generation as C.W. McCall, set the whole nightmare to music. Wolf Creek Pass. On the surface, it's a tall tale, all comic timing and runaway momentum. What people forget is that it grew out of a real one. Two truckers who lost their brakes coming down Wolf Creek and rode it all the way to the bottom, straight into a feed store in Pagosa Springs. Wolf Creek crests at a grade of 6.8%, and the westbound descent today passes two runaway truck ramps cut into the mountain. The song described the disaster first, then the highway department built the answer. Because eventually, the arithmetic became impossible to argue with. 40 tons at highway speed carries a staggering load of kinetic energy, and that energy does not vanish just because the driver wants it to. It has to be spent on heat and friction, or on a guardrail, a stand of trees, a building, the next vehicle down the road. You cannot make a 40-ton runaway stop itself once the brakes are gone. The only humane move is to give it somewhere to die that doesn't take a town with it. And what goes inside those beds breaks everyone's intuition. Ask anyone what you'd fill a truck-catching ramp with, and they reach for something grippy. Coarse, toothy, jagged edges to bite a tire. They're wrong, and wrong in a way that's almost funny. Engineers specify the dead opposite: loose, smooth, rounded pea gravel, sorted to a uniform size, closer to a bin of marbles than crushed rock. The secret is rolling resistance. A jagged stone locks against its neighbors and packs into a crust, a hard floor a truck climbs onto and keeps rolling across. Round stones refuse to lock. The instant a wheel touches them, they roll and flow around the tire, dragging the truck down into the bed instead of letting it ride over the top, eating energy with every foot. Make it too grippy, and the truck stays on the surface and keeps going. You aren't building grip, you're building quicksand, and quicksand only works loose, so after every catch a crew has to regrade the bed and fluff the stone, or it hardens into a road. But here is the truth under the last line of defense: it is not a wall, and it does not always hold. The most heavily used escape ramp in the country sits on Interstate 70 in Colorado, and the recovery operators who work it will tell you flatly that they have watched trucks go up the ramp, run clean out the top of the gravel, and roll off the end of it. The guaranteed stop is not guaranteed. It is just the best odds a driver has left once every other card has been played and lost. Which is why the people who run those mountains finally stopped punishing anyone for using them. In Colorado, the State Patrol will not ticket you for taking a runaway ramp, and will not bill you for the crew that regrades the bed afterward. The only cost is the recovery, a third-party operator to drag your rig out of the gravel, somewhere around $2,500 and the better part of 4 hours. And that leniency was never kindness. It was a correction, written in answer to a body count. For years, drivers ran the math in the half-second they had, the tow bill and the lost time and the bruised pride against the ramp sitting right there, and a certain number gambled instead, riding the brakes a little farther rather than swallow the cost. Some lost that bet. An entire state agency stared at decades of wreckage and concluded that the thing between a driver and the ramp was never ignorance. It was cost and shame, and the same pride that dreamed up Georgia Overdrive in the first place. So they took the cost away. The reason there's no fine today is the drivers who didn't pull off. The rules were written in blood.